Friends, what I'm about to share with you happened right here in our quiet suburban neighborhood. It's a story about bullies in suits, a corrupt homeowners association, and how my wife's military training saved our family from losing everything we'd worked for. If you've ever dealt with an overpowering HOA or felt helpless against bureaucratic bullies, this story is for you. Please stick around because what happens next will shock you. When my wife Amanda and I bought our home 3 years ago, we thought we'd finally made it. After years of apartment living, we had our own little piece of the American dream, a 2-story house with a white picket fence in what the realtor called a family-friendly community with strong neighborhood values. That phrase should have been our warning sign. Amanda is a military veteran, 12 years of service, multiple deployments overseas, and skills that most people only see in movies. But she's also the kindest person I know. She volunteers at the VA hospital, helps elderly neighbors with their groceries, and can fix anything around the house. When we moved in, she was just excited to finally have a place to call home. The trouble started on our very first week. Our HOA president, Richard Hale, showed up at our door wearing a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. He had this practiced smile, the kind politicians use when they want your vote, but not your opinion. "Welcome to Riverside Meadows," he said, shaking my hand just a little too firmly. "I trust you've familiarized yourselves with our community covenants." Amanda stepped up beside me. We read through them during the buying process. Standard stuff: no loud parties, keep the grass cut, reasonable neighbor expectations. Richard's smile tightened as he looked her up and down. "Well, Mrs. Johnson, Amanda Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, you'll find our standards here are quite comprehensive. We maintain property values through strict adherence to our guidelines. I do hope you understand the importance of compliance." The way he said compliance made my skin crawl. It wasn't a request. It was a threat wrapped in suburban politeness. Within 2 weeks, the letters started arriving. Certified mail, official letterhead, fancy legal language, all saying the same thing. We were in violation. First, it was our garbage can. Apparently, leaving it visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup was a $50 fine. Then it was Amanda's truck, a matte black Ford she'd owned for years. According to Richard's interpretation of the covenants, it looked commercial and didn't belong in a residential driveway. $250 for parking my own truck in my own driveway? Amanda laughed, but I could see the anger building behind her eyes. "Honey, I've seen power-hungry dictators before. They all start the same way, with ridiculous rules that nobody can actually follow." But it got worse. Much worse. The fines kept coming. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of black, $75. Our flower beds had the wrong type of mulch, $100. Amanda's vegetable garden, which she'd planted with such care, was deemed agricultural use in a residential zone, $300 when we tried to appeal. Richard's response was always the same: rules are rules. Pay the fine or face further consequences. That's when we met Richard's enforcement team. I was coming home from work one evening when I saw them, 2 men in matching polo shirts with HOA compliance patches, taking photos of our house. They weren't subtle about it. One had a clipboard, the other a professional camera with a telephoto lens. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward them. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The larger one, built like a linebacker with a military-style haircut, looked me up and down. "Routine inspection, sir. We're documenting violations." "What violations?" He gestured vaguely at our property. "Several covenant infractions have been reported. We're gathering evidence for the board." Amanda appeared at my side. In her quiet voice, the one that meant business, she asked, "And you are?" "HOA enforcement," the man replied, puffing out his chest. "Ma'am, you might want to encourage your husband to cooperate. These matters can escalate quickly." I saw something change in Amanda's posture. Her shoulders squared, her stance widened slightly, subtle changes that most people wouldn't notice. But I'd learned to recognize when my wife switched into what she called operational mode. "Sir," she said. her voice perfectly calm. "You're taking photographs of our private property without permission? I'm going to need you to delete those photos and leave our premises." The man laughed. "Lady, this is HOA business. You don't get to tell us what to do." Amanda stepped forward, just one step. But somehow it changed the entire dynamic of the conversation. "Actually, I do. This is private property. You have no legal authority here. You have 30 seconds to leave, or I'll be calling the police to report trespassing." Something in her tone made both men pause. They exchanged glances, muttered something about difficult residents, and left. But as they walked away, I heard one of them say to the other, "Hale's not going to like this. Looks like we've got another problem family." That night, Amanda and I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by HOA letters and violation notices. The fines had reached nearly $2,000, money we didn't have. For violations that seemed designed to be impossible to avoid, they're trying to force us out, Amanda said quietly. "This isn't about maintaining property values or community standards. This is systematic harassment." I felt helpless. What can we do? We can't afford to hire a lawyer. The HOA has all the power here. Amanda was quiet for a long moment, staring out our back window into the darkness. When she finally spoke, her voice had a steel edge I recognized from her military days. "Honey, I've dealt with bullies before. Real ones. The kind with actual weapons and real power. Richard Hale and his little enforcement squad. They're playing games they don't understand. People they shouldn't mess with." She stood up and walked to our bedroom. When she came back, she was carrying a black duffel bag I hadn't seen in years, her old military gear bag. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done from the beginning," she said. "These people think they can intimidate us because they've never met real resistance. They're about to learn that some lines you just don't cross." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about what Amanda had said, about bullies and real power. I didn't know it then, but everything was about to change. When we left off, Amanda had pulled out her old military gear bag and made it clear that these bullies had picked the wrong family to mess with. What happened next changed everything. 3 days after the confrontation with the HOA enforcers, Amanda was in our kitchen making coffee before her shift at the VA hospital. It was just after dawn, quiet, peaceful, kind of morning that makes you grateful for small blessings. That's when she saw him. Through our back window, there was a man in dark clothing crouched by our back gate. He wasn't just looking around, he was examining our door lock, testing it, trying to see if it would open. Amanda's military training kicked in instantly. She moved away from the window, staying low and out of sight, and called to me in the bedroom. "Honey, come here." Quietly, I stumbled out, still half asleep, and she pointed toward the back door. "There's someone trying to get into our house." My blood ran cold. Should we call the police? Amanda was already moving, pulling items from that black duffel bag with practiced efficiency. "Look at his jacket." I squinted through the dim morning light and saw it, an HOA compliance. Patch on the man's sleeve. "They sent someone to break into our home?" I whispered, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Amanda's face was stone cold. "They just crossed a line they can't uncross." What happened next was like watching a different person take over my wife's body. The gentle woman who helped elderly neighbors and volunteered at the hospital disappeared, replaced by the professional soldier who had served overseas in dangerous places. She moved through our house like a ghost, setting up what she called overwatch position at our front window. From there, she could see anyone approaching our property from any direction. "Amanda, what are you doing?" "What I was trained to do," she said simply. "Protect and defend." The man at our back door finally gave up and left, but Amanda didn't relax. If anything, she became more focused. "They're testing us," she explained, "seeing how we react, looking for weaknesses. This isn't random harassment anymore. This is tactical intimidation. And there's only one way to deal with people like this." Over the next week, Amanda did something that amazed and frankly scared me a little bit, using skills I didn't even know she had. She started gathering intelligence on Richard Hale and his enforcement operation. She found out that our neighborhood wasn't the only one being targeted. Richard was running similar schemes in 3 other communities, using HOA rules as weapons to force out families who wouldn't or couldn't pay his escalating fines. It's a pattern, she explained, showing me printouts and documents she'd somehow acquired. He targets families who seem vulnerable, single parents, elderly residents, people who won't fight back. Then he uses his enforcement team to intimidate them into selling their homes below market value. But why? Because he's got buyers lined up, investment companies that flip the houses for profit. Richard gets a cut of every sale. My stomach turned. So we're not the first family he's tried to force out? Honey, we're not even close. But we're going to be the last. Amanda's plan was brilliant and terrifying at the same time. She was going to give Richard and his enforcers exactly what they thought they wanted, a confrontation. But it would be on her terms, with her rules. She started by making herself visible around the neighborhood, walking our dog at specific times, working in the garden, washing her truck in the driveway, always at moments when she knew the enforcers were watching. I want them to think we're scared and trying to comply, she explained. Let them get overconfident. Meanwhile, she was setting up surveillance equipment around our property, small hidden cameras that would record everything. She also contacted some of her old military buddies, letting them know what was happening. Just in case, she said when I asked why. In case of what? Her smile was cold as winter. In case these people are dumb enough to escalate this beyond harassment. It happened on a Friday evening. I was grilling burgers in our backyard when I heard the front doorbell ring. Then ring again. Then someone started pounding on the door. Amanda appeared beside me, calm as always, but I could see the alertness in her eyes. They're here, she said. Simply, we walked around to the front of the house together. And there they were, Richard Hale and 4 of his enforcement team. Standing on our porch like they owned the place? Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Richard called out, his voice dripping with false authority. We need to discuss your continued non-compliance with community standards. Amanda stepped forward. Mr. Hale, you're on our private property without invitation. I'm going to need you to leave. One of the enforcers, the big one from before, stepped closer. Lady, you don't seem to understand the situation here. Your fines are past due. Your violations continue. The board has voted for immediate enforcement action. What does that mean? I asked. Richard smiled that snake oil smile. It means you have 24 hours to pay all outstanding fines, now totaling $4,200, or face eviction proceedings. You can't evict us from our own home, Amanda said quietly. Actually, according to the covenants you signed, persistent violation of community standards can result in forced sale of the property. We have that authority. That's when Amanda did something that still gives me chills thinking about it. She laughed, not a nervous laugh or a scared laugh. A laugh that said she knew something they didn't. Sir, she said, her voice perfectly steady. You just made a very serious mistake. Amanda pulled out her phone and started recording, for the record, she said clearly. You've just admitted to operating an extortion scheme using fraudulent HOA authority. You've threatened us with illegal eviction, and you're currently trespassing on our property after being asked to leave. Richard's face went red. You can't record this conversation. Actually, I can. This is our property, and you're threatening us. But here's what you really don't understand. This entire conversation is being broadcast live to several of my military contacts, including 2 who work in federal law enforcement. The enforcers looked at each other nervously. Amanda continued, her voice growing stronger. You see, gentlemen, I spent 12 years serving this country, protecting people from bullies and criminals. I know the difference between legitimate authority and thugs in cheap polo shirts. And what you're running here? This is criminal enterprise, plain and simple. Richard tried to bluster his way through. This is ridiculous. We have every right to know, Amanda cut him off. You don't. You have no legal authority to evict anyone. You have no right to break into our property. And you certainly have no right to run extortion schemes against military families. She held up a folder I hadn't seen before. This contains documentation of your activities in 4 different neighborhoods. fraudulent fines, illegal surveillance, intimidation tactics, financial records showing kickbacks from forced property sales. I've already shared copies with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, the State Attorney General's office. And a very interested reporter from Channel 7 News, the color drained from Richard's face. "You're bluffing?" said. But his voice cracked. Amanda smiled, the same calm, confident smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. "Sir, I don't bluff. I served in places where bluffing gets people killed. What I do is gather intelligence, assess threats, and neutralize them through appropriate channels." She gestured toward the street, where I suddenly noticed several cars parked that hadn't been there before. "Those are federal agents who've been investigating your operation for the past week. They've been waiting for you to make another extortion attempt so they could witness it firsthand. What happened next was like something from a movie. FBI agents approached from 3 different directions, badges visible, professional, and calm. Richard and his enforcement team were surrounded before they could react. Richard Hale, you're under arrest for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion," as they read him his rights. Richard looked at Amanda with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he snarled. Amanda's response was perfect. "Sir, for you, it's been over since the moment you decided to target a military family. You just didn't know it yet." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Richard's operation. He'd forced dozens of families from their homes over the past 3 years, collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent fines and kickbacks from property sales. Many of those families, elderly couples, single parents, young military families like us, got justice at last. Several were able to buy back their homes at fair market prices. Richard was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His enforcement team faced various charges ranging from harassment to conspiracy. In our neighborhood, it's peaceful now. We have a new HOA board made up of actual neighbors who care about community, not profit. Children play in the streets again. People talk to each other over fences instead of hiding behind curtains. As I wrap up this story, I want to share what I learned from watching my wife handle this situation. Amanda never lost her temper, never stopped following the law, and never let fear make her decisions for her. But most importantly, she reminded me that sometimes good people have to stand up to bullies, not just for themselves, but for everyone who comes after them. The thing about bullies, Amanda told me later, is they're counting on good people to stay quiet and look the other way. But when you shine a light on what they're really doing, they crumble pretty fast. Our home is still our sanctuary. Amanda still volunteers at the VA, still helps neighbors with their groceries, still fixes everything around the house. But now I know that beneath that gentle exterior lives someone who will never back down when family and community are threatened. And Richard Hale? Well, let's just say he learned the hard way that some people aren't as defenseless as they look.